Welcome to Storytime with Nanny, and this is day 5. This is a very big book. It's going to take us more than just today to get through this one. One of the stories we're going to end up reading we've already read, but it is another edition of it. It's not the exact same story. I think you're going to enjoy it. This book is Treasury of Virtues, and it's about courage and love and honesty. It's by a lot of different authors and illustrators, but I'll give you the names of each of those before I read the story. It's a really cool book. I had to borrow it from one of my children because when they moved, they loved it so much they took it with them. We're going to be able to have enough time to cover 3 stories today. The first one's going to be The Little Red Hen. And yes, this is the one I was talking about, but it's different. And I think you'll be able to see the difference right away. I think you're going to enjoy it. It's The Little Red Hen, and it is a tale of hard work. And it's illustrated by Linda Docky Graves, and other illustrations are by Marty Noble, and it's adapted, which means she rewrote it in her own words. Jennifer Bodart, B-O-U-D-A-R-T. The Little Red Hen lived next to the road by the farmer's house. Where she lived wasn't very fancy, but she loved it. She shared her home with her 5 baby chicks and her friends, the dog, the cat, and the duck. The Little Red Hen worked very hard. She kept the house and the yard neat and clean. There always seemed to be plenty of work to do in order to keep everything looking good. Everyone liked having a clean house and good food on the table. When it came time to do the chores, though, the others always seemed to have something else to do. As soon as the hen would send her baby chicks out to play, the older animals always seemed to disappear too. The Little Red Hen did all the work herself. Her days were filled with making beds, cleaning, gardening, and cooking. One day, the Little Red Hen was sweeping her yard. When she looked down on the ground, she found some kernels of wheat. She put the kernels into her pocket for safekeeping. Then she went to look for the dog, cat, and duck. She found them by the pond. She showed them the kernels and asked, "Who will help me plant these?" Her 3 friends looked at each other. Then they looked at the Little Red Hen. "Not us," they said. "Right now we need to take a nap." "I'll plant them myself," she told them. The Little Red Hen returned to the garden and began digging. Soon her baby chicks came to see what she was doing. They told her they wanted to help. The Little Red Hen and her 5 baby chicks pretended they were burying treasure. The game made the work go quickly. Soon they had planted all the kernels. The Little Red Hen visited the garden every day to watch the wheat grow. She made sure the young plants got plenty of sunshine and care. One day she found her 3 friends leaning against the farmer's barn. The Little Red Hen said, "There are weeds that are stopping the wheat from growing. Will you help me pull the weeds?" "I can't," said the cat. "They're all dirty. Do you have any idea how long it takes me to wash my paws?" The dog and the duck both had excuses too. No one could help. "I'll just do it myself," said the Little Red Hen. Then she walked back to the garden. Once again her chicks joined her. They had a contest to see who could pull the most weeds. It was such fun that they finished in no time. A dry spell kept the rain away for a week. The Little Red Hen was worried about the wheat. If the plants didn't get some water soon, the tender stalks would either wither. If they did not get some water soon, the tender stalks would wither and die. The only thing to do was bring water to the plants. She went looking for her friends. She found them on top of the hay pile. The hen looked up and said, "The summer heat is too strong for the wheat. Who will help me water the garden?" The dog, the cat, and the duck looked at her. "We're busy writing a song and can't be bothered now," growled the dog. Didn't you hear me playing my banjo?" "I'll just water it myself," she said. The Little Red Hen took her watering pail to the garden. her chicks came to keep her company. The hen pretended to be a thundercloud and tried to sprinkle them with water. Before long, the whole garden had been watered. The summer sun was very good, and the wheat grew fast. The little red hen and her chicks visited the garden every day. They lovingly tended to the wheat, and it grew strong and hearty. There was going to be a bumper crop. Soon it was fall, and the wheat turned golden brown. The little red hen knew what that meant. She found her friends playing cards under the farmer's wagon. The hen knelt down and said, "Who will help me harvest the wheat?" The dog, the cat, and the duck kept their eyes on their cards. "Not us," they mumbled. "Can't you see we're busy?" The hen stood up and fixed her apron. "I'll harvest it myself," she said. The little red hen took her cutting tools to the garden. This time the 5 chicks were waiting for her. The family cut the wheat and tied it into bundles. They sang songs, and soon the hard work was done. Even though she had already spent a great deal of time and energy on the garden, the little red hen knew the work was not finished. She often told her chicks that if a job was worth doing, it was worth doing well. The little red hen went looking for her friends. She found them sitting by the road. "I need to have the wheat ground into flour," she said. "Who will help me carry it to the miller?" The dog, the cat, and the duck looked away down the road. The miller was located several miles away. "Not us," the trio said. "It's too far for us to walk." Once again, the little red hen would have to do it herself. She and her chicks left right away. They had a long journey ahead of them, and the chicks moved slowly. The trip seemed to go much faster when they pretended to be hobos traveling with their knapsacks across the country. The little red hen returned home. She and the chicks were so tired that they soon fell asleep. That night, everyone slept very well. The next morning, the little red hen went outside. Her friends were sunbathing on the roof. She called to them, "Who will help me bake bread with my flour?" The dog, the cat, and the duck didn't even bother looking down. "It's a beautiful day. Who would want to be indoors baking bread?" observed the dog. The hen shook her head. She thought, who would want to spend all day doing nothing? She told the 3, "I'll bake it myself." The little red hen went inside. Her chicks tried to make the bread dough for her. Flour was all over the floor, and the chicks too. They shaped the dough into a big loaf and pretended to be sculptors making a statue. Everyone was sorry to have to stop when the loaf was finished. The smell of baking bread floated in the air. The dog, the cat, and the duck came and looked into the kitchen. 2 baby chicks danced around the little red hen. She asked, "Who will help me eat this tasty fresh bread?" "We will," squeaked all 5 of her chicks. "We will," cried the group in the doorway. "Well," said the little red hen, "anyone who helped make this bread can have some. So if you help plant the wheat, water it, weed it, harvest it, take it to the miller, or bake the bread, raise your hand." That night, 6 tummies got their fill of bread as a reward for work well done. And after each story, they give one to grow on. And theirs is about hard work. It says, "Playing is always more fun than work," or is it? Think about how the dog, the cat, and the duck in this story spent their days. Now think about how the little red hen and her chicks spent their days. Who do you think had more fun and excitement? This story shows us that when you work together, you can have fun together. You also get to enjoy the rewards of your work. What would you rather spend your time doing? I like to do both. I do like to have fun time with my family, my friends, or sitting outside just enjoying looking at the trees, the sky, the pasture, but I don't enjoy it unless I got my work done. So I do spend the first several part of the days getting work done and house chores done and laundry and errands, and then I have my fun. And I get to enjoy myself more knowing that everything else is already done and taken care of. Now, I guess I've always liked to follow the saying, work before pleasure. So, that's how I like to do. Now, the Elves and the Shoemaker. And this is also a tale of hard work, and it's illustrated by Kristen Goeters, Goeters, and adapted by Jennifer Bodart, and it says, there once was a shoemaker who lived with his wife. He enjoyed his work very much and set up his shop inside their small house. Times were hard for the shoemaker and his wife. Snowstorms had kept everyone indoors for weeks, so no one could go buy any of their shoes. The shoemaker had little money for food, and he had only enough leather left to make one pair of shoes. His wife asked, "What are we to do? The cupboards are bare, and we have no firewood. Even our last candle has almost burned away." Her voice was gentle. She knew her husband worked hard for what little they had. "We must not worry," said the shoemaker. "Things will work out for us. You'll see. I will finish these shoes tomorrow, and someone will buy them." He cut out the leather and then went to bed. The shoemaker would finish working first thing in the morning. When the shoemaker woke up early the next morning, the whole house was cold. His body shivered, and he was very tired. The shoemaker went to his workbench, rubbing his tired eyes. When he looked down, the shoemaker thought he would find the pieces of leather just as he had left them. What he saw instead made him rub his eyes again. A finished pair of shoes were on the workbench. The shoemaker ran his hands over the shoes. Sure enough, they were made from the same leather that he had cut the previous night. The shoes were very beautiful. The shoemaker admired the tight, even stitching, the placement of the bows, and the silky shine of the leather. He could not have made better shoes himself. The shoemaker called for his wife to come and look at the wonderful shoes. She was just as amazed as he was. "Who could have made these shoes?" she asked. The shoemaker and his wife did not know who had given them such a wonderful gift. They did not know that the shoes were worth a lot and would bring a good price. "What a great day," said the shoemaker. "We have a pair of shoes to sell, and the weather is finally clear. Maybe our good luck will continue and someone will buy these shoes." At that moment there was a knock on the door. It was a traveler who had seen the shoemaker's sign. "I work for the king," he explained, "and I have been traveling throughout the countryside. My travels have worn holes in my shoes. I was hoping that I could buy a pair from you." The traveler tried on the new shoes, and they fit his feet perfectly. He walked around the shop for a few moments and said, "These are the most comfortable shoes I've ever worn." Then he gave the shoemaker a shiny gold coin to pay for them. With the gold coin, the shoemaker had enough money to buy some things he really needed. He bought food, firewood, and enough leather to make 2 pairs of shoes. He also bought a wool shawl for his wife. The couple was very thankful for their good luck, and they decided they would work harder than ever to keep it. Once again, the shoemaker cut the leather into pieces ready for sewing and placed them on his workbench. The next morning he found 2 more pairs of finished shoes, and they were just as good as the first pair. Within hours, the shoemaker sold both pairs of shoes and bought more leather. The next day there were 4 pairs of shoes waiting on the workbench. This continued for many nights until the shoemaker's shelves were filled with beautiful shoes like no one had ever seen before. Life soon changed for the shoemaker. Now he and his wife always had wood for the fire and enough food to eat. The shoemaker bought better tools, lots of leather, and the best brass buckles. He bought his wife an oil lamp, a new blanket, and a lace cap. The shoemaker was always kind to the people who traveled from all over the kingdom to buy his shoes. He could have charged high prices, but instead he charged just enough to live a comfortable life. Word of the shoemaker's fine shoes made him the most popular shoemaker in the land. He was very happy that his small shop was always filled with people, but still something bothered the shoemaker. One evening he said to his wife, "Every night while we are tucked in our beds, someone is working hard to help us. It's a shame we don't even know who it is. Why don't we stay up to find out?" That night the shoemaker cut the leather into pieces and placed them on his workbench. Just like always, he turned down the oil lamp and left the room. But instead of going to bed, he and his wife hid in the doorway. The moon rose and filled the room with silver light. Soon something was moving on the workbench. 2 elves were there. They stood just a few inches tall, no taller than the shoe they were sewing. The elves began to work, helping each other handle the leather and tools. Their clothing was old and worn, which made the shoemaker and his wife sad. The elves wore thin, torn pants and shirts that were ripped and covered with patches. They were making shoes, but they didn't have any for themselves. They must have been cold, but their cheery faces and busy hands didn't show it. The couple tiptoed off to bed, leaving the elves to do their work. The next morning, the shoemaker and his wife looked at the newly made shoes that were on the workbench, and they thought about the elves. "Did you see how quickly those little fellows worked together, and how carefully they placed each stitch?" asked the shoemaker. His wife frowned and answered, "I only saw their poor clothing and bare feet. Clearly they are in need, yet they work all night to help us." Her husband agreed and said, "I have an idea. We will make those little elves the clothes they need. They are so tiny that it will be easy for me to make some fine shoes for them." His wife clapped her hands. "Yes, and I will use a bit of my own wool shawl and a corner from our blanket to make proper pants and coats." The couple started right away to make the two tiny suits of clothing. The shoemaker and his wife finished making the outfits for the elves. That evening, instead of leaving pieces of leather on the bench, they left the clothes and shoes. Once again, they hid behind the doorway and waited for the elves to come. The elves appeared at midnight. They climbed upon the workbench, then stopped in their tracks. What was this? Where were the pieces of leather and the tools? The elves were amazed when they saw the clothes. At once they put on the fine new suits. They were so excited they began to sing. "What merry little elves we are! These fine clothes fit us perfectly. Who'd be so kind we wish we knew? We'd like to give our thanks to you." The shoemaker and his wife were so pleased they could hardly keep themselves from cheering. Weeks passed, and the shoemaker's shop was always filled with people. He still offered the finest shoes in the land, and people from all around wanted a pair. He and his wife were very comfortable. One thing had changed, though. The elves had not come back since that night they received their new suits of clothes. The shoemaker and his wife did not mind. The shoemaker enjoyed his work and was happy to be back at his workbench. He and his wife were glad that they could help the elves who had worked so hard and been so nice to them. In the evenings, while the shoemaker cut leather at his bench and his wife baked bread, they thought about the two elves. Because of their kindness and hard work, the shoemaker and his wife lived happily. The cupboards were always filled, and their house was always warm. Their one to grow on says, "Hard work is the secret to making dreams and wishes come true." This story shows that good things come from working hard. The shoemaker and his wife worked hard, and they were rewarded by the elves coming to help them out. In return, the shoemaker and his wife gave the elves the wonderful new clothes. They were grateful to the elves and wanted to thank them for all of their hard work. We all have different dreams. The shoemaker and his wife dreamed of living comfortably. The elves dreamed of some fine new clothes. No matter what your dream is, hard work can help make it happen. And what I think about is we all have a job to do, different jobs, and we all need help. And we are supposed to be good to one another and help one another out. You might help your parents out keeping your room clean, or different chores that you may have around the house. And if there's something that you know how to do and somebody doesn't, you can teach your younger brother, sister, or cousin, someone, one of your friends, neighbors that you're friends with. They might not know how to do something you know how to do, and you can always help and do it cheerfully. The last story for today is The Emperor's New Clothes, and it is a tale of honesty. It is illustrated by Sherry, I'm going to spell this last name, Neidigh. It's adapted by Mary Rowitz, Rowitz. It says, "Once upon a time, there was an emperor who loved clothes more than anything else. He had more clothes than anyone in the land. The emperor's clothes filled all the closets and most of the rooms in the royal palace. It was a good thing the emperor was very rich, because he spent so much money on clothes. The emperor selected only the finest, most comfortable fabrics, and he hired the best tailors to work for him. The emperor also spent a lot of money on mirrors. He thought his fancy clothes made him look quite dashing, so he spent most of his free time looking at himself. The emperor's pride was well known throughout the kingdom. Everyone thought he was quite silly to spend so much time in front of his mirrors. They made jokes behind the emperor's back, but no one ever said anything directly to his face. They did not want to make the emperor angry because he was, after all, the ruler of the land. Word of the silly emperor who loved fine clothes reached two thieves in a faraway land. Instead of making jokes about him, the thieves thought of a way that they could use the emperor's pride to make themselves rich. Sounds like they're planning on being tricky, but they are thieves, so. The thieves dressed up as traveling tailors and made the long journey to the emperor's palace. They told the palace guards that they had the most wonderful fabric in all of the world, and they asked for permission to show it to the emperor. Of course, the guards let them into the palace. The sneaky thieves presented themselves to the emperor and his wife. They explained that their fabric was not only wonderful, but magical too. Only the wisest people in the land will see this fabric, they said. It will be invisible to fools and to those who are unfit for their office. When the thieves opened their bags, the emperor squinted. He saw nothing at all in their hands. Well, I must be a fool, thought the emperor. Either that or I do not deserve to sit on this throne. The emperor was embarrassed that he could not see the fabric, so he said, "That is the most magnificent fabric I have ever seen." The emperor asked his wife what she thought of the magical fabric. She couldn't see anything, but she did not want anyone to think she was a fool, so she said, "It is quite extraordinary. It is like no other fabric that I know." Knowing his wife was no fool, the emperor thought the fabric must be real, even though he could not see it. He offered the thieves 20 pieces of gold to make a new suit for him. They thanked the emperor and went to work right away. "When you wear this suit, it will feel as light as a spider's web against your skin," one thief said as he measured the top of the emperor's head. The other thief then explained, "You might even feel as though you're wearing nothing at all." "I can't wait to try on my new suit," said the emperor excitedly. "It really sounds like it's the most wonderful fabric in the world." The thieves smiled slyly and winked at each other behind the emperor's back. They had finished sizing him up. After a few days, the royal minister went to see how the new suit was coming along. He was going to tell the tailors to work as quickly as possible because the emperor was getting anxious. The minister was stunned by what he didn't see. The tailors were cutting away at the air with their scissors, and they were stitching up fabric that wasn't there. "Is it possible that I am a fool?" the minister gulped. Seeing the minister, one of the thieves said, "Please tell the emperor that his suit will be ready soon. But first, please order another tray of food for us. All this hard work is making us very hungry." That much must be true, the minister thought, as he saw apple cords, chicken legs, and bites of cheese all over the floor. The thieves had eaten so much already, they must be working hard on something. Finally, the thieves brought the emperor his new suit. He put it on slowly, being careful not to snag the fine stitching he couldn't see. Then he strutted around the room. He had never felt so dashing. "This is truly the finest suit I have ever had," the emperor said to the royal minister. "Tell me, what do you think of it?" "If you are happy, then I am happy," said the royal minister, who was truly anything but happy. In his eyes, the emperor was standing in front of a mirror in his underwear, admiring a new suit that wasn't even there. The emperor wanted to show off his new suit to everyone in the land. He asked the royal minister to call for a royal parade the next day. "If that is what you want," said the minister, "then you shall have your parade." Everyone in the kingdom was excited about the parade. They had long ago grown bored with all the stories of the emperor's clothes, but what interested them now was the new magical fabric. They had all heard that fools could not see the fabric, and they wanted to find out who among them was a fool and who was not. On the day of the parade, everyone pushed and shoved to get the best view, but when the emperor appeared, everyone was shocked. The emperor was in his underwear. Nobody in the crowd could see the emperor's suit, but of course no one would admit it out loud. Nobody wanted to look like a fool. Instead, the people said, "How handsome you look, Your Majesty. That certainly is a splendid suit. I never knew any fabric could look so wonderful." Suddenly, a young boy cried out over the noisy crowd. "The emperor isn't wearing a new suit," he said. "What is everybody talking about? The emperor is wearing nothing but his underwear." The emperor quickly turned to look at the crowd. They stood in stunned silence. Instantly the emperor knew the boy was telling the truth. He realized that he had been a fool, and now he was parading himself throughout the kingdom in his underwear. Needless to say, the emperor felt quite embarrassed and quite foolish. All at once everyone in the crowd began to laugh. They realized that they had all been foolish too. They pretended to see a suit that was not even there because they were afraid what the others would think. They felt silly for not telling the truth to the emperor. After the parade, the embarrassed emperor quickly returned to the palace to put on some clothes. He ignored all of his fancy and frilly clothes and chose to put on a simple blue robe with the plain yellow buttons. "Ah, that's better," the emperor said as he slipped on the robe. "I was beginning to get a chill from my new magical suit." For the first time, the emperor left his room without looking in the mirror. Then he invited the honest young boy to speak with him in his court. "I have decided to make you a junior minister. You have shown that you are very brave. You risked being called a fool to tell me the truth," the emperor said. "You will always be one of my most trusted friends." "Thank you," the boy said. "I will always be honest with you, even if you don't like what I have to say." "I'm counting on it," said the emperor. And they're one to grow on about honesty is sometimes being honest means telling people things they don't want to hear. It's not always easy, and sometimes it's even scary to be honest. No matter how difficult it is, though, telling the truth is very important. It lets people know where they stand, and it helps keep people from making mistakes. If someone had been honest with the emperor earlier, he never would have made such a fool of himself. Thank goodness for the honest little boy. If he had not told the truth, the emperor might still be ruling the kingdom in his underwear. And what I get out of that is it most definitely is, as they say, the best policy to always tell the truth. And they're right, it's not always easy. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's scary, but it's always best to tell the truth. And also think about a lesson we learned reading this about pride. How the emperor spent all the money, all this money and all this on clothes and on mirrors to look at himself. And that's kind of a silly thing to spend all your money on, and or that much money on. And it's silly to spend that much time looking at ourselves in the mirror. Yes, we need to look our best and be clean, and but we don't want to have so much pride that that's the only thing that we focus on, and that's what we spend the majority of our time doing. Because we can be helpful and useful to others and a blessing, and we'd much rather spend our time doing that than looking in the mirror. Well, that is all for today. I hope you have a very happy, blessed day, and I will see you next time on Storytime with Nanny.